Hi there, I'm your host, Jonathan Mondon, and I'm super excited today because I have a very special guest with me that I've known for a few years already. Time flies.
Yeah.
Is Bill Price, CX consultant and guru, very known author of not one, not two, but three books. And today we are here to talk about this latest book that you wrote with David, the Frictionless Organization.
hmm
So thank you for joining us, Bill. It's really a pleasure to see you and to have you with me.
I'm so happy to be with you, Jonathan, and thanks for arranging this. I'm looking forward to getting into this topic with you and share some stories and ideas for the audience.
Hey, that's great. So it's funny because the first time we met, actually, I don't know if you remember at that time, it was in France. And it
hmm
was for the promotion of your second book.
hmm
You just launched it, and I think just finalized the cover for the French market,
Yes, yes.
your customer rules. And it's been already, what's 8 years, 9 years?
Probably 9 years now. That's right. It came out 9 years ago. It's quite amazing how time flies, but that's the first time we met there in Paris.
So congrats on your third book. So before we really deep dive, maybe can you give us a bit of flavor on yourself and
hmm
why did you start it? How did you start it as a consultant and as an
Sure.
author?
Well, no, thank you. I'll make it really brief because I want to get to the main topic here. Coming out of graduate school, I started as a consultant with McKinsey and Company. So I joined the very large firm McKinsey and stayed there for 6 years, but decided to move away from it as far as I could go. And so I became a chief financial officer for a startup company in the IVR, the interactive
Nice.
voice response field. We were bought by a large telco in the United States called MCI Telecommunications, and I served there for 8 years at MCI, and then got a call from a headhunter, from a recruiter, to that Amazon was looking for the very first time a global head of customer service, and
Who is Amazon?
Amazon was very small at the time. Uh, had just begun to do some work in Germany and the UK, but the company was quite small, and so I decided to go for it. Got the job and served in that role, running customer service globally, and that really was sort of the way that. With a great team that I had around me, that I was able to put in place a lot of the ideas that have proven to be parts of all three of the books that I've written.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So maybe we can start by this. Could you summarize in a few words what the frictionless organization is about?
Sure. So David Jaffe and I, David lives in Melbourne, Australia. David and I eventually settled on the word frictionless by interviewing about a dozen or 15 companies around the world who were really well known for delivering great customer experience. So when we asked them how they did it, frankly, most of them had trouble describing it because it was so ingrained. It was so natural for them. We had to keep pulling it out of them with stories and with frameworks. And what always came up was their definition of friction and their goal to get rid of it and therefore to become frictionless. In other words, they talked about the opposite of frictionless more than they did frictionless. They said, we just
Yeah.
don't like it when customers are frustrated. We don't like it when they have to contact us multiple times. We don't like it, and they tell us they don't like it, if a digital tool doesn't work and they have to speak to someone in a contact center. They don't like it when a product doesn't arrive on time. And so all of those are sources of friction. And so what these companies told us and what David and I then wrote about in the book was, well, let's figure out how we can define friction, make sure we know what that's like, and then let's look at the opposite. Let's try to get rid of it through the different tools and the steps that we have in the book.
That's great. And I know we also have been talking about customer efforts for a while. I know you're actually a big fan, if I'm not wrong, about
Mm-hmm.
customer effort score.
Right. Yep.
And this remind me really your first book that was
Mm-hmm.
really a good one for me to start reading when I enter into this industry. It was best service is no service. I think
Right.
you wrote this one about 20 years ago, right?
Well, almost. I certainly was talking about it even more than 20 years ago. It's the expression that I gave to Jeff Bezos when he interviewed me. The final interview of my day was with Jeff, and he asked me what was my philosophy for running customer service from the companies where I'd run customer service before, like MCI. And I said, well, the best service is no service. Why should anybody need to contact Amazon for support? And he said, yes, 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 that's exactly what I want to do. And so the idea of best service is no service was let's figure out what's broken and what's confusing and let's fix it. So it was a more narrow view than the new book, but it still was the title got everyone's attention because the best service is no service. People, oh, you have to give great service. Well, sure you do, but do you really need it to have that customer contact you in the first place? Why did the customer bother to contact you with a problem? Let's fix the problem.
Yeah.
Let's clear up the
Yeah.
confusion. So I'm glad that you found it meaningful because it certainly has it continues to sell quite well, and we continue to hear a lot of good stories about it.
No, no, really, I love it. The concept is actually quite simple. It's very easy to understand. And I mean, in both book, whether it's best service is no service, whether it's frictionless organization, in all your book, actually, you give a lot of example of company,
Right.
how they are implementing it. I think this is very, very helpful. But what I fail to understand is why we don't see more organization
Oh yeah.
like using those concepts since they seem so easy to grasp.
Yep. Well, that's been a frustration to me personally for many, many years. And there are so many roadblocks to best service. There's so many roadblocks to the frictionless organization, which we'll get to in more detail, I know, in a few minutes. But just to summarize three of them very briefly. One of them is there's an attitude for a lot of established companies that they've always done it that way, that it's always worked. Maybe there have been some problems, but it's always worked. And they want to just continue to build stuff. They just want to continue to grow. And they realize that with growth comes mistakes, and they'll basically get over it. But what they don't realize is that with growth comes even bigger mistakes, and customers are not tolerant for that anymore. They don't want things to be broken. They don't want things to happen that way. The second reason is that most companies, especially senior executives, are not close enough to the customer. And that's been something that's bothered me for a long time. I always ask CEOs, other C-level executives, even the heads of customer service, I say, when was the last time you actually talked to a customer? When was the last time you listened to a customer call real time and heard what that voice of customer truly was? Not a report, not a summary, but listen to the customer. And unfortunately, most executives that I talk to say, oh, gosh, it's been quite a while now. And so they wind up working by what I call indirection. They only work with reports and summaries and averages and not that personal sense. And then the third problem is that they're not really, and it's related to the second one, is that they're not really focused on the upset customers. The upset customers, some of those upset customers explain they're upset with you. Most of them don't even bother. And so the customers that don't bother to contact you are probably still pretty upset, and they probably are getting ready to leave. So the third reason out of the three for companies not being able to make this work is that they tend to ignore the most important constituent they have, which is the upset customer, so they can figure out how to fix those issues.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I remember visiting some call center and discussing with agents that knew very clearly where were the problems.
Yes.
But
Yes.
when I was asking them why this is not being surfaced,
Right.
it's just like, oh, we just talk about it internally, but nothing have
No.
changed over the years.
Well, and let me build on that one point, Jonathan. It's a very good one, which is when you do talk to those frontline representatives or other supervisors, you often hear, well, they're not listening to me. And by they, what they mean is the executives. And that gets very demoralizing for them because the job gets tougher and tougher. They hear more and more complaints. No one seems to be doing anything about it. They are not doing it. So if you happen to be they listening to this call, if you're in a senior position, think about that. Talk to your representatives. Find out what they're hearing all the time, and it'll be really illuminating for you too.
Yeah, I believe so too. So maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the organizations that are doing extremely good that you like to quote also in your different books.
Well, let me talk about a new one and a returning one. Maybe that's a way to think about it. The new one is actually a company down in New Zealand, based in New Zealand and Australia, called Xero. And the company is spelled Xero. And they are a business to business financial accounting software company that is growing very, very fast. And Xero had, from the beginning, a very different attitude for supporting its business customers. Number one, no inbound phone channel. Number two, no inbound email. Number three, no inbound chat, no live chat. The only way you can get support and help if you're a Xero customer is you go online to what they call the Xero Central. It's a portal. And they
Right.
claim, and I've read reviews that support this, that about 96% of their customers get the answer in the portal, which is a great number. So the 4% get routed to, or an alert goes to someone inside of the company, Xero, who then calls back that customer within 2 hours. So it's the reverse.
Interesting.
And now that
Yeah.
person who calls back, Jonathan, is not necessarily a customer service rep. It could be. It's often the head of billing or someone who wrote the code for adding more customers on a batch basis. In other words, it's someone who says, Jonathan, I saw you're stuck in the Xero Central, and I'm here to help you because I wrote that code. I can help you
I
with it.
see.
And so it's a
Yeah.
wonderful connection that happens. Their stock price, their stock valuation has just gone almost through the roof versus its main competitors. Companies like Intuit and Sage, which are both very well-run companies, Xero is
Yeah.
just taking off. So that's one company, which is a new one. David and I came across them and we interviewed them and profiled them in the new book. But a returning company we talk about is Nike. So Nike, very well-known company, big global brand. They were initially selling through third-party retail stores. Then they started selling through their own branded stores. Then they started going direct to customers, and they're balancing the delicate act among all three of those go-to-market channels in a really good way. So if a Nike customer, they actually have built this idea of being a Nike member. You can join for no cost and become a Nike member. But if you're a Nike member, Nike customer, and you go to a retail store that's a Nike brand or someone else's brand, they'll recognize who you are and they know where you have been in all these different channels in the past. And one reason they did
Capturing all
that,
your journey.
it's a true all across the whole journey. So they've done very, very well. I love to talk about Nike, great American success story, and their stock price has done remarkably well versus Adidas and Under Armour and some of the other major players in the marketplace. There are a few other companies that are smaller, like Brooks Running, that are doing well too, but Nike, as a almost $50 billion company, is really setting the standard.
As a skill, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's great. Great to hear the story. And I like that you quoted one company that is in New Zealand because we often hear about
yeah,
the big company in US.
oh yeah,
I know you are traveling the world and you have seen many organizations across the world. So I would be curious to hear your opinion about the different maturity that you see
right,
when it comes to delivering frictionless
right,
service to client between North America,
right.
Europe, Asia.
Well, let me answer it this way. In the new book, we talk about two different types of organizations, two different types of companies. We talked about innovators and renovators. So renovators are usually older, more established companies that suddenly realize, or over time they realize, they better do a better job in terms of customer experience. The innovators start from scratch. That they're born that way. Amazon was born that way. Now that was 27 years ago, but Amazon was born that way. Xero was born that way. Nike, because of its founder Phil Knight, was actually born that way too. But as I said, in a different channel. The renovators, as I said again, are the companies that are more established. So to answer your question this way, there are more renovators or renovator potential companies in Europe and the United States because of the age of the industries and the age of
I
their
see.
processes.
Yeah,
It's a
makes sense.
younger, overall, it's a younger and more um, innovative environment that I've found in Asia, whether it's in India, whether it's in China, whether it's in New Zealand, Singapore, other countries like that, Malaysia. There are established companies for sure, telcos, insurance companies, whatever. But there seem to be, and I'm excited by the examples that David and I are finding in Asia of companies that are just beginning to think very differently about how they operate. So there are innovators and renovators in all three regions. The renovators better renovate, or else they're going to be taken over by the innovators. So that's the challenge that we see. So I think in the US and the European markets, they've begun to wake up that customer experience is essential and they have to do a better
Yeah.
job. The renovators, the older companies.
Yeah, otherwise they're gonna lose their market share very fast.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, great, great to hear all of this. Maybe you could tell a little something to all the CX leaders that are listening to us that don't know how to start, what they could do to execute and become a renovator. Maybe if they are in an organization that have already a few years and they see there is change to do, but they don't know how to start.
Well, interestingly, in the final chapter of the book, The Frictionless Organization, David and I came up with the chapter is called Start. So we actually go through the entire book, and the final chapter is called Start. And in Start, we kind of summarize the book. It's basically a recap, but I'll just summarize the final chapter for us here and for your audience, for the audience we have. The first thing is to figure out, why are customers bothering to express their frustration or to ask for help in various ways? How do you collect that information? Most companies collect it with too many different reason codes or too many different intents, hundreds, if not thousands of intents, which are almost impossible to understand. Or they only collect and report on a few, like billing issues. Billing issues. Well, what's a billing issue? Is a billing issue good or bad? Do we want billing issues? Do we not want them? And billing, how are they trending over time? Billing issues is not detailed enough, and thousands of reasons are way too detailed. So the first thing to do is to basically rethink why customers are contacting you with only about 25 to 50 reasons. They're not really rocket science. My daughter actually is a rocket scientist, so I can say that term in a fun way. She is one. But this is not rocket science. So you come up with things like, why is my bill so high? I disagree with my bill. Why didn't you give me the credit that I requested? Why didn't you issue the refund that you requested? Those are, in the customer's language, examples of the reasons we would want to see, not billing issues in total. That's the first step. The second step is to figure out, well, who caused that issue in the first place? It's not customer service. Customer service is the group that kind of catches all this and tries to have a great big umbrella to catch all this stuff. And you have to figure out, to start, which departments or which functions were causing that issue in the first place. Is it marketing? Is it billing? Is it IT? Is it product design? Is it legal? And then get the information to them quickly. Get them to listen to calls. Get them to find out what's going on. They'll have a very quick grasp of what's happening once they can start listening to recorded calls, listening to real-time calls, talking to business customers, whatever that might be. And I'll give you just a third one, because there are other ones we could get to later, is get rid of averages. Averages are so simplified, and we get seduced by averages. There's a book out called The Tyranny of Averages, but the idea is, let's say this: Net Promoter Score is an average. Net Promoter goes from 0 to 10. Customer effort score is an average. CSAT's an average. Average handle time, hey, an average. So averages are deceitful, because if they move a little bit in one direction or another, you tend to be kind of excited, or maybe not too excited, but you don't necessarily dig into why. So we are breaking down now with our clients and seeing companies look at the lowest numbers in the Net Promoter Score. If a customer gives you a 0, 1, or 2, which is within the detractor category, they're called deep detractors. It's a horrible expression we have to think about, but you need to focus on every one of those deep detractors. Call them up, talk to them, find out what the heck's going on, because you're lucky that they told you they're a deep detractor, but they probably are getting ready to leave. So those are some tips for companies to think about, whether it's a renovator in the wings, or even whether it's a smaller company. You think about getting rid of averages, get the owners of those issues involved, and then break down those reasons so that they are much more understandable.
Yeah, love the summary. Thank you very much. And okay, I get it. When you get your KPI, your CSATs, forget about your KPI straight away. Just look at the extreme, what you are doing very well and
Exactly.
what you are doing very poorly.
Exactly. Oh, and,
Ah,
and, and,
that's
and let me interrupt with a really good point you just mentioned. It's also good to look at those where you're doing well. I'm really glad you
yeah.
mentioned that. I've talked about the failures and the doing poorly, but you need to find out why is it that you are delighting some customers? Hopefully a lot, but at least some of them. What is it that you're doing? Is it
Oh, can you
because
repeat this?
yeah, exactly. How can you repeat it? Because if you lose their loyalty, it slides downhill really fast. So you're exactly right. It's look at the edges, both edges, and forget about the average because the average is just a mathematical or a mean sum. It really doesn't mean that. It doesn't really represent that much.
Great, great. Okay, so one thing is, I think that you are always someone that come up with structure, and I think the book also give a lot of
Mm,
methodology, a lot of structure, which I really enjoy. I feel that sometimes we forget the structure, especially with the new technology. So I just wanted to shift about what is happening now with the technology,
right,
especially for the contact center space. So
right,
everybody is talking about AI. Now the new theme is Gen AI. It's been a few months that everybody is not talking about Gen AI, not
right,
AI anymore. We talk about Gen AI.
right.
Well, we know that this is going to bring productivity. We know that this is going to bring a bit of change.
Mhm.
I personally feel for the better, but it's not going to be that fast
Right,
compared to how the market is hyping it.
right.
But I just wanted to listen to your thoughts about if we project ourselves not in 1 to 2 years, but maybe a little bit longer, maybe
Mm,
5 to 10 years.
mm, mm.
How do you see the industry changing with the technology?
I was just at a conference last week, Jonathan. We were talking about it just before we started this conversation that talked about how the age of AI is going to completely change the importance of empathy,
Mm,
empathy and listening and caring. We've always talked about that in the customer service and customer experience business. Someone at a reception desk at a hotel needs to really recognize who you are, help you out if you have a problem. Someone as a customer service rep, someone in a retail store. We've always talked about it, but unfortunately, they're dealing with all sorts of problems as well. AI is going to remove a lot of the simple stuff and answer questions that otherwise would have been handled by an agent or a retail rep or a person in a hotel at the front
mm,
desk. And so what's going to be left are going to be tougher and tougher issues. The ones that are again hard to find because of everything else that's going on around them. And the emphasis now in the next 5 years, 10 years is going to be on upskilling, increasing the skills in the workforce, giving them more capabilities, enabling them to have a better connection with customers. Even though we've said this for years, I don't think
yeah,
we've delivered it very well as an industry. Now it's going to be
yeah.
imperative because a lot of AI is going to basically remove a lot of the issues
Mm.
that are relatively simple to be handled.
Mm. But I think it's empowering for the agents or
It is.
for the service reps because
Yeah,
suddenly they can become this person that is really here to help, to assist, to
right.
bring value to the caller or to the person that they are assisting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I feel that it's good for the industry and that we can automate whatever we can automate with
Right.
AI.
Well, yeah, and AI can also be a beautiful and it's already becoming a beautiful enabler for the agents. So
Mm.
the and this is going to be doubly important as the issues get more complicated. Most knowledge bases, most knowledge systems that companies have are
Yeah,
incredibly difficult to navigate.
I agree.
And the most experienced agents basically don't even bother with the knowledge system because they know it.
They
Okay,
know everything
but
is in their head
in
already.
the head.
But the new one,
But the new ones are like, oh, they're rifling through, trying to figure out what's going on, clicking on the keypad to figure out what's going on. AI can now listen, as you know, AI can listen to the conversation in real time and say, if you're Jonathan, the agent, the customer service agent, Jonathan, this is what the AI will say. This is what the customer is saying. Take down this knowledge article, make this offer, apologize this way, and it's a form of scripting that we hated 20 years ago, but now is very intelligent because it's real
mm,
time, sentiment based, and so the agent doesn't have to necessarily go through this really amazing range of possible answers to get it. And in fact, before we go on, let me go back to my favorite story at Nike, which is years ago, Nike had in their contact centers a very good workforce, but they started getting calls or questions from what Nike was calling avid runners. Avid runners were people that have multiple pairs of shoes. They run all the time. They may be competitive runners. And here would be a sample question to you as a customer service rep. Hey, Jonathan, I'm going to run my 5th marathon at altitude. Now, in Singapore, you don't have altitude, but think about something where you've got big mountains. So now I'm
Yeah.
calling and saying, will my Nike Pegasus such and such shoes, will they hold up if I'm going to be running at altitude? And Jonathan goes, oh, let me help you here. I'm a runner, but I'm not a marathoner. Ooh, so you go through the database. Well, what Nike decided to do was to say, let's actually route the avid runner to a Nike shoe engineer at headquarters. Let's have them
Oh,
talk.
okay.
So it's kind of the opposite of zero in a way when you think about it. So the Nike shoe engineers actually loved it because here they are trying to design new shoes and figure out what users other than themselves need. And then they started getting this flow of actual runners calling them up saying, I'm going to be running my first marathon at altitude. What about my Pegasus? And if you're that position, you could say, I love the Pegasus, but it's really not good for altitude. You really need to get our
Yeah.
such and such shoe. And now you've got this conversation that's really connected. So it's a form of empathy or connectedness or empowerment, as you mentioned before, that Nike put in place, which has proven to be incredibly successful for them. So I think that's going to be the future, is finding opportunities to have those connections and relationships. We're all human. We want those relationships anyway.
All agents are going to be expert of their own domain that can
Yeah,
really bring value.
they will.
And
They
and the
will.
best things, they will all have their own personal assistants. As we're gonna change the job scope with the AI now.
Yeah.
You get
Yep.
your own personal assistant when you
That's right.
join us.
Yeah, and you can probably you can modify it. You can change it so that it suits what you need. Exactly right.
That's great. Thank you very much, Bill. Just a wrap-up question I really wanted to ask you. You've been writing book for quite many years now. If we go back in time, just after you leave
Ah,
Amazon, and where you start writing your
yeah.
first book, what would you tell your younger self?
Um, it's interesting. I would tell my younger self to write sooner, not wait. In other words, David Jaffe, my co-author that you know, David was
Yeah.
on this topic early on and said, Bill, you need to write about this. And I said, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
sure. And then he said, Bill, can I help you write the book? I really want to work with this. I said, sure, sure, sure. But it took a number of years for us to finally get to it. I guess I would say, tell my younger self, and I would tell the younger selves out there in the audience, do it now. Do it now. Get it written. Get the word out there. Get the reaction from readers, from practitioners, from people in academics, and then just keep writing, because it's a really good way to challenge yourself and do it soon. So basically, don't wait.
Okay, I have some more work for tonight then.
You do. That's right. Get going.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Bill. Really appreciate you taking the time with us today. So this was Bill Price, co-author with David Jaffe of the Frictionless Organization, their third book. The book is available on Amazon. And you can learn there everything about, obviously, how to deliver better customer experience, gain efficiency, or just increase your revenue or competing with the new player. The book defines a methodology. Customer-facing organization can follow this methodology. There is a lot of example, a lot of company, very, very easy to read, very, very easy to understand. Really, really love it. Once again, I'm Jonathan Mondon from Toku, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I enjoyed it.